Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going deep into the world of a truly incredible runner, Marco Olmo.
And to get there, we're going to be using these super interesting articles that we found on rockingultra.com. It's a blog, by the way, with tons of stuff for runners, like whether you're just starting out or you're, like a hardcore ultra marathon runner.
Yeah, it's got something for everyone. And what's cool about rockingultra.com is they really get into the mental side of running, too.
Yeah.
Which is perfect for us because for this deep dive, we're basically like your AI guides, summarizing all the cool stuff from those articles.
Exactly. And the guy we're talking about today, Marco Olmo, is a total legend. This guy won the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, that's the UTMB, twice. And get this, he was 58 and 59 years old when he did it.
Can you believe that? I mean, the UTMB, that's like one of the hardest races out there. It really
Yeah.
makes you think about age and, what we think is possible, especially in a sport where you usually see like younger athletes dominating.
Totally. Olmo's story is proof that you can achieve amazing things no matter how old you are.
So rockingultra.com does a really great job of setting the scene with Olmo's early life. He grew up in this region in Italy called Piedmont, and it sounds like it was pretty tough, not easy growing up there.
Yeah, definitely not a walk in the park. The articles talk about him working all these demanding jobs before he ever even considered running. Like, truck driving, working in a quarry.
Wow, that's a far cry from, running through the mountains,
Right.
right? I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about how his life changed.
And here's the thing, he didn't start running seriously until later in life. It wasn't like he'd been doing it since he was a kid or anything.
It's kind of like running found him, right?
Mm.
Which is a pretty cool thought. Like, sometimes the things we're meant to do come to us when we least expect them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when running found Olmo, he really embraced it. His first UTMB win back in 2006 was a huge deal. It was like everyone was talking about it. Here was this 58-year-old guy competing against all these younger sponsored athletes, and bam, he beats them all.
And, the UTMB, that race is over 100 miles long. It goes through the Alps with crazy elevation changes. Even for top athletes, it's brutal. RockingUltra.com really captures how incredible that victory was.
Totally. And they highlight how it wasn't just about physical strength. It was Olmo's mental game that really set him apart. He had this incredible resilience, this determination that just wouldn't quit.
It's fascinating how RockingUltra.com digs into that whole mental aspect of running. It's not just about like training your body. It's about training your mind to push through pain and fatigue and all that self-doubt that creeps in.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things Olmo talks about in one of the articles is how he'd break the race down into smaller chunks in his mind. Like he wouldn't focus on the entire 100 miles all at once. He'd just focus on getting to the next checkpoint.
That's a really good strategy, actually. I bet that could work for anything, not just running. Like, if you have a big project or something, just break it down into smaller steps and suddenly it doesn't seem so overwhelming.
Totally. And it makes you wonder how much of what we can achieve is actually limited by our own mindset. Maybe we're capable of way more than we think if we can just get our minds on board.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So it's not just about mental strength, though. RockingUltra.com also gets into Olmo's whole philosophy,
Yeah.
his way of looking at life. It's really unique, especially for an athlete.
It is. He wasn't into all the typical athlete stuff like sponsorships and making a ton of money. He was all about simplicity, just keeping things real.
Yeah, there's this quote in one of the articles, and it just stuck with me. He says, "I don't need much to be happy." It's like he found contentment in the simple things.
Mhm.
Nature, running, challenging himself.
It's really refreshing, especially in a world where everyone's always trying to get more, more, more. Olmo's story reminds us that maybe happiness is actually about having less.
Right, like maybe it's about figuring out what truly matters to you and letting go of all the rest.
Exactly. And rockingultra.com also touches on a really personal part of Olmo's life, the passing of his wife, Renata, back in 2018. It was a really tough time for him, obviously.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even someone as strong as Olmo goes through really tough things. But even after losing his wife, he kept running. It was like his way of coping,
Hmm.
of finding solace and peace.
It shows you the power of having something that helps you get through those difficult times. It doesn't have to be running, of course, but having something that gives you strength and purpose is so important.
Absolutely. But before we get too deep into those lessons, let's switch gears for a second. RockingUltra.com spends some time talking about Olmo's connection with nature. It's a really big part of his story.
Oh, yeah. It's not just like a pretty background for his runs. It's like a central part of his whole running experience.
Ugh.
He sees the mountains as a teacher, something that can teach you a lot about yourself if you're open to it.
It's almost like a spiritual connection, right? Like
Uh-huh.
he talks about the mountains with so much respect, like they're a living being.
There's another great quote in one of the articles. He says, "The mountain gives you nothing for free, but if you respect it, it teaches you everything." I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty profound. And, it makes you think about how sometimes the most important lessons come from unexpected places,
Yeah.
like out in nature. And that's what's so cool about these rockingultra.com articles. They're not just about the physical side of running. They get into all these deeper themes, mental, emotional, even spiritual.
Definitely. And Olmo embodies that,
Yeah,
His story shows that running can be so much more than just exercise. It can be a way to discover yourself, to find strength, to live a more meaningful life.
it really can. And if anyone's interested in learning more about Almost perspective, rockingultra.com is a great place to start. They have articles for everyone, whether you're a total beginner or, training for an ultramarathon like the UTMB.
Yeah, they even have books on Amazon if you want to dive even deeper.
So we'll keep going with our deep dive in a bit, but first, why don't we take a quick break? Okay, so we're back and ready to unpack some of these lessons that we touched on earlier. Like what makes Marco Olmo's story so powerful? You know, beyond just the whole running thing. And again, big shout out to rockingultra.com for all these amazing insights.
Totally. These articles, they go deep.
Right.
It's not just about how to train or what races to run. It's about like the bigger picture of what running can do for your life.
Right. One thing that really stood out to me was like the whole it's never too late thing. I mean, Olmo didn't even start running seriously till he was what, in his 40s?
Yeah.
And look what he achieved.
It's true. Like, you don't have to have everything figured out by a certain age, right? Almost like a walking example of that. It's
Yeah.
never too late to find something you're passionate about, to go after a dream, to just totally reinvent yourself.
Yeah, age is just a number, right? It's
Yeah.
all about being willing to try new things, push yourself a little.
And speaking of pushing yourself, rockingultra.com talks a lot about Olmo's resilience. The guy went through some tough stuff, a difficult childhood, losing his wife later in life, but he always found a way to keep going, to turn that pain into something positive through running.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, he used running as a way to cope, to process his emotions, to find some peace when things were rough.
It's really powerful. It shows you how running can be like therapeutic,
Yeah,
a way to connect with yourself and find some healing.
for sure. And another big takeaway, and they talk about this a lot on rockingultra.com, is the importance of mental strength. Like Olmo himself said, and I love this quote, you must learn to accept pain and push beyond it. That was his whole thing. Especially with ultra running, it's as much a mental game as a physical one.
Totally. And they give some examples of how he actually built up that mental toughness. It wasn't just about like being tough.
Yeah.
It was about developing strategies, mental strategies to handle pain and exhaustion.
Like I remember one article talking about how he would mentally break the race into these smaller sections, right? Instead of focusing on the whole like crazy distance, he'd just focus on getting to the next checkpoint.
It's smart. And you know what? That's something anyone can use, right? Whether you're running a marathon or working on a tough project, anything. Break it down into smaller pieces, and it suddenly feels way less overwhelming.
Totally. And it makes you realize how much our mindset plays a role in everything we do.
Right. Like, imagine what we could achieve if we could just train our minds to be as strong as Olmo's.
So we've talked about mental toughness, but we can't forget about Olmo's emphasis on simplicity. Remember how we were saying he wasn't about all the fancy stuff, the sponsors, the big money?
Oh, yeah, for sure. He was all about keeping things simple, finding contentment in the basics, which is a pretty radical idea these days, right?
Totally. It's like everywhere you look, there's pressure to buy more, achieve more, look a certain way. But Olmo's story is like this breath of fresh air. It's like, hey, maybe happiness is about having less.
Yeah, it's about finding what truly matters to you and focusing on that. And rockingultra.com does a great job of highlighting this. It's not about deprivation. It's about choosing what you value and finding joy in that.
Right. It's about living authentically.
Hmm.
Okay. So one more big idea that comes up a lot in these articles is this idea of running for yourself, not for anyone else.
Yeah, like finding that internal motivation, that fire that keeps you going even when it's tough. Olmo wasn't running for fame or money or anything like that. He was running for the pure joy of it, for the challenge, for that connection with nature he loved so much.
That's so cool. And it's a good lesson for anything, right? It's about finding what truly inspires you and doing it because you love it, not because you're trying to impress someone else.
Absolutely. It's about defining your own success, finding your own path.
Okay, so I think it's pretty clear by now that Marco Olmo's story is about so much more than just running.
It really is. It's about resilience, mental strength, finding joy in simple things, living your truth.
And it's amazing how we can get all these insights from articles on a running blog, right? rockingultra.com, they're doing something right over there.
They are. It shows you the power of good storytelling. It can take you to another world, make you think differently, even inspire you to make some changes in your own life.
So we're going to move on to the last part of our deep dive in a sec. But first, I just want to say, if anyone wants to learn more about Marco Olmo or ultra running or just get some food for thought about life in general, definitely check out rockingultra.com.
Yeah, they've got tons of great articles and even books on Amazon if you want to go even deeper.
So stay with us. We'll be right back with the final part of our Marco Olmo deep dive. We're back, and honestly, I'm so glad we decided to do this deep dive on Marco Olmo. Reading all these articles on rockandultra.com has been really inspiring. You start to understand why people call him a legend. It's not just about winning races.
Yeah, it's about way more than that. His training, his whole approach to life, it's pretty remarkable. There's a lot we can learn from him, even if, we're not planning to run 100 miles anytime soon.
Exactly. One thing that really stuck with me was how much he embraced discomfort. Like rockingultra.com talks about how he would purposely train in the worst condition.
Oh, yeah. They mentioned how he'd run in the middle of the day when it was super hot or
Yeah.
choose trails with crazy steep hills, even when it was, kind of miserable.
Right. It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But he figured that if he could push through all that discomfort during training, he'd be ready for anything on race day.
It's like he was toughening himself up mentally and physically. He knew that ultra running, you're going to hit those rough patches. It's about pushing through that pain, that exhaustion, and just keeping going.
And it wasn't just about physical training either. rockingultra.com also points out how he, embraced discomfort in his everyday life, too. Like his whole simple living thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. He never shied away from hard work. Back in the day, it was manual labor, and then later on, it was the grueling training for those ultramarathons. It's like he understood that to really grow, to really achieve something, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I like that. It makes you think, right? We spend so much time trying to avoid discomfort in our lives. But maybe there's something to be said for leaning into it. Maybe that's where we build resilience, that grit that helps us deal with whatever life throws our way.
It's true. Olmo's story is definitely a good reminder of that. Discomfort isn't always a bad thing. It can actually be an opportunity to grow, to become stronger.
Totally. So we're wrapping up this deep dive into Marco Olmo. And I'm curious, what was your biggest takeaway? What really resonated with you?
Tough question. I think for me, it's the combination of mental strength and simplicity. Olmo's story shows that you don't need a bunch of fancy stuff or complicated plans to do amazing things. It's about having that strong mind, knowing what's important to you, and being willing to push yourself beyond your comfort zone.
Yeah, I agree. And it's pretty awesome that we can learn all this from a running blog, right? Big shout out to rockingultra.com. They've got some seriously good stuff over there.
Definitely. It's a good reminder that stories can teach us so much. They can take us to different worlds, show us new ways of thinking, and maybe even inspire us to try something new.
Exactly. So if you're even a little bit curious about Marco Olmo, ultra running, or just, looking for some inspiration, I highly recommend checking out rockingultra.com. They've got tons of great articles, and they even have books on Amazon if you want to go even deeper.
Yeah, you might even find yourself inspired to dust off those running shoes and hit the trails. You never know.
That's true. All right, well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Marco Olmo. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing those boundaries.